Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our DLM webinar from Redgate Software. This is our monthly series where we go over the database lifecycle management and how you can smooth your database development. We've got a lot of tools to show you. And so I am Steve Jones. I'm going to kind of host this and handle questions and manage it a little bit. I work for Redgate Software. But I've been a DBA and a developer for a lot of years. I've actually been working on SQL Server for 25 years now, and all the versions from 4.2 all the way up to the current 2016. I've worked in big companies, small companies, a variety of different industries throughout my career. I've written books, and I speak extensively on different SQL Server topics at SQL Saturdays and other conferences. I'm an evangelist for Redgate, so they have me running all over the place to do that, and then I run SQLServerCentral.com. That's why I'm associated with Redgate. Redgate owns SQL Server Central, and I've been working with that site for about 15 years now. So you see all my contact information up there. Please feel free if you want to get a hold of me to do that. And then with me today, we have Arnie Ask Introduction. Arnie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Arneh. I've been with Redgate just over 5 years, and as a sales engineer, I'm basically responsible for working with our new customers as well as existing customers. I make recommendation on best practices around DevOps, changing processes, as well as helping our customers get up and running with our products, both pre-sales as a proof of concept as well as post-sales. And today I'll be basically walking you through the demo of our DLM solution. And here's my contact details, so if you guys have any questions after the demo, or if you guys are interested in looking at our products, then definitely reach out.
All right, thanks, Arnie. So our agenda is real quick. We want to talk just a little bit about Redgate and DevOps, kind of some of the challenges and some of the reasons we'll do that. And I'll let Arnie kind of go through some of those things. And then really we want to spend most of our time today in the demo so that you can see how the database development would flow through a DLM process, kind of in a DevOps style method of working. And so please feel free to answer or ask questions if you have them. There is a questions panel in your little control panel thing, and we'll either answer those online or we'll type the answers in there as we go. We are recording this webinar, and then we have all of these up on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and look at them. Every month we do a different combination of CI tools and release tools and version control systems because we don't really care what system you use. We support all the different platforms, and we're happy to go and work any way you want. So Redgate Software is a company that we build tools to help you build software. That's really our philosophy, and we try to build, reusable, simple, easy to understand tools that solve all these common types of problems and make you work more efficiently. As you can see on the slide, our tools are used by tons of companies all across the world, all different industries, to help them build software. And then in addition to building these tools and obviously trying to make money by selling them, Redgate really supports the community because we believe in giving back and trying to make everybody a little bit better developer or DBA or system administrator. And so Redgate supports SimpleTalk and SQL Server Central as community services to help educate you and give you a way to learn on the job. So with that, Arnie, let me turn it over to you and let's run into the DevOps processes and why we use DLM.
Sounds good. Thank you, Steve. So first of all, what's so challenging about doing DevOps on databases? Some of you may already be utilizing best practices around DLM, such as having your source control as your single source of truth, or validating the changes that you commit to source control through automated builds, and releasing software to higher environments from those artifacts that you generate from your builds. But your databases are probably left out of this process, and you have some manual processes that you follow around the delivery of your databases. This is mainly because databases carry state and they hold business critical data that needs to be safely preserved throughout the lifecycle of the application. Deploying application code is simple, right? You just toss out old code, replace it with a new one. In some rare cases, you may even scrap your code base and start from scratch due to major changes to requirement, which is totally fine, but that obviously doesn't apply to the tables in your databases. We need to make sure that we're transforming the state of the database in a way that it doesn't put our existing data at risk. So As a result of those manual processes around databases, on the next slide we're going to look at some common issues that we see database shops facing around database delivery. Now, none of these issues are new. They've been around, but they were probably not considered as serious issues back in the day. But today, a lot of IT organizations consider these as critical issues. Because with the fast evolving markets, every business now wants to be able to ship software and new features out to the market as quickly as possible and as frequently as possible to stay ahead of the game. And this obviously adds more pressure to IT as you need to respond to new requirements faster. Therefore, it's now more important than ever to make sure that your database change management is well aligned with the application code and that you're utilizing best practices such as continuous integration and continuous delivery on both ends to help support the business needs. So what is the benefit and the purpose of DLM in general? So the goal is basically to help you build repeatability into your database delivery process, where you're continuously testing the production readiness of your changes that you apply to your database. And obviously this all starts with source controlling of your database changes and making sure that source control becomes the single source of truth. DLM, the product side of it, is actually the easy part. What's more challenging is getting those right processes in place and the right culture in place in order to be able to do true DevOps. And starting with source control is definitely the right place to start. So making sure that whatever development changes you make to your databases go into source control. So by committing those database changes into source control on a regular basis, you can then introduce automated builds and tests to make sure that all of these small units of changes are tested and validated multiple times before you're even ready to deploy to production, which can result into greater predictability over your releases, increased efficiency by eliminating the repetition of manual steps, and the need for your DBAs to review thousands of lines of scripts every time you try to deploy. And finally, this statement from the 2016 DevOps report, I think is pretty relevant to what we're going to talk about today. So IT shops who utilize best practices around continuous delivery and DevOps in general deploy code more frequently with more confidence because the code that you deploy, is tested more frequently and the bugs are detected early in the process versus later at the point of deployments to production, for instance. And that enables you to be more agile in the software delivery process and as a result makes the company twice as likely to exceed the profitability and the goals to help you, and our goal is to help you narrow the gap by integrating the databases into your application lifecycle process.
So Arnie, let me break real quick. I know, guys, we have a lot of things at Redgate. We want to launch a quick poll and just see what tools you use for Redgate. So if you would take a minute and answer us, we'd like to know. I know I've been doing a lot of work with the tools. It seems like we've had a lot of updates this year, Arnie, a lot of new releases. So
yeah, very exciting stuff.
Yeah, it's been kind of exciting to see. So let me give it just a few more seconds here, everybody. Anything you're using, just give us a quick vote. There we are. All right, all right, I'll close it. We'll move on, and let's see this all visually now.
Okay, fantastic. So yeah, so this is basically the diagram of the process that you typically follow going from development to operations and deployments to your higher environment. So starting from the left, you have three rows. The top is the diagram. The middle row is the Redgate tools that you would be using at each of the stages, and the bottom row is where the infrastructure or the products that we plug into. So first, starting from development, you make your changes to your databases in Management Studio, which is what most people prefer based on the survey that both us and Visual Studio did recently. Once you make your changes to your databases, then our SQL Source Control plugin would help you get those changes into your source control system, whether it's SVN, TFS, Git, or any other source control system, without having to save up scripts manually, check them into source control manually. So it kind of eliminates the manual steps that you would follow in order to get your database changes into source control if you're working in Management Studio. So what we store in source control is the state of your database. So basically to create scripts for your objects in source control. And when it comes to deployments, we basically compare the state of the database that is in source control against your higher environments in order to generate the actual update script for your deployment.
So Arnie, real quick, I just launched the poll. If everybody would just real quick take a look at that. Now, we don't care what version control system you use, right? We're happy to work
Correct.
with anything. And SQL Source Control isn't a version control system, so I don't know if some people get confused about that. So
yeah, really good point.
Yeah, so whatever version control system your developers already use today, or you may want to start using, and you should be using, we're happy to integrate with that. And all we do is make it easy for you to get those scripts in and out of there. All right, looks like most people have voted, so let's jump forward, Arnie, and show us the next part of this.
Okay, perfect. So we talked about basically automating validation of the changes that you make to your database after they get into source control. So, and that's what the next step is here. So automating the builds, which basically validates the state of your database that is in source control to make sure that you haven't broken any dependencies and that there is no SQL Server syntax or compilation errors. So our DLM automation basically plugs into your build system. So today we're going to be demoing TeamCity, but as you can see, we plug into pretty much all the major build systems out there that you could use to automate builds on both the application code side and the database side using our DLM component.
All right, let me, I want to launch another quick poll, everyone. We're just curious what build systems you might use, or if you use one at all. Is there one you prefer over any other one, Arnie?
I personally prefer TeamCity simply because it's easier to work with. It's more user-friendly, and it's also easy to basically get new plugins in place. And it does have support, out-of-box support for most source control systems, so you don't have to install additional plugins to, like, for example, to support Git or support SVN. Whereas with Jenkins, you know, there is a separate plugin for every source control system that you have to put in place.
So, and I would say that I used to really, I mean, I do like TeamCity, but I think Visual Studio Online and TFS, the new TFS is fast becoming my favorite version control system, or sorry, my CI system right now, because I love that online interface, and I think the integration with workflow is really nice.
Exactly, yeah, totally agree.
All right, so what's after continuous integration?
Okay, so once you've validated your builds and you get successful builds, we generate an artifact which is a NuGet package, and that NuGet package can be used as a source of deployment going into your higher environment. So it's very important for you to, you know, make sure that you're making your changes in your development environment. The other day I was on a call with a customer, and I was doing a demo, and one of the questions that they raised was, you know, our developers make changes to, you know, the staging environment. What do you guys have in place in this solution that captures those changes and pushes back to development? And I had to stop him right there and you know, emphasize how important the process is, you know, as opposed to the tools. If you don't have the right process in place, then you'd actually be better off not using any of these tools, because, you know, if you're going to get these tools in place and continue with the Wild West, then my recommendation would be not to do it. So yeah, so on the deployment side of things, we deploy from the artifacts that we've validated from the builds, which are those NuGet packages. The NuGet packages become your source of deployment, and we compare those to the next environment, such as your testing, QA, staging, and production, to generate the report of what is being deployed, where you can actually review the deployment And once approved, then that can get executed on your target environment. So that's all covered as part of DLM Automation, both the builds and the release side of things. And we also have some products on the monitoring side, such as our SQL Monitor tool that you could use to monitor the performance of your SQL servers. That we're not going to cover as part of this demo today because an hour would not be enough.
Right. So let me launch one last poll and just see if anybody's using a release management system. Arnie, while we're doing this, somebody asked if we can show an example of a migration script in the demo or an environment-specific change. So I know that can be a little bit time-consuming, but just to get you to think about that, if you got a second.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we'll. Yeah, I should be able to demo that as part of the demo. I'll probably go through one cycle, and then if we have time, then I'll come back and make a migration change and deploy that.
Okay. All right. Looks like quite a few people have voted, so let me close that, and let's go on to the demo. So let me switch over to you.
Okay,
and let's
fantastic.
get your screen up.
All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, you should be able to see my management studio.
Yep, I see it.
Okay, fantastic. So we're now going to follow the diagram that we just looked at. So we'll start up in our development environment, make some changes to our development database, get those changes into source control, so SVN as our source control system. And once we have our changes into source control, then we validate them through an automated build. If our build succeeds, then we go ahead and deploy those changes to our higher environments. The database that I'll be working with today is this SVN AdventureWorks Dev database. So this represents my development environment. I also have a couple of other databases that represent the target environments that we'll be deploying to. So everything's set up locally on my machine. So that's the reason why I have everything on a single instance of SQL Server. You've noticed that my database icon is green here. This is an indicator of the database being linked to source control through our SQL Source Control plugin. And that's what you see here in the middle. As you can see, there is nothing to commit to source control, so no objects with changes to be committed. So the next thing we're going to do is make some changes to our database and try to check those changes into source control. So let's go ahead and start making a couple of changes here. So I'll modify a couple of existing objects. So let's say we want to add a couple of columns here. So we have some additional tools as part of this solution. SQL Prompt is one of them, which is one of our productivity tools. It just makes it easier for you to write SQL in Management Studio. So I'm just going to go ahead and add these columns. I'm also going to format it using prompt again and make my change. As part of SQL Source Control, you also have the option to source control data in your lookup tables or your reference tables. So that's basically data that you normally make changes to in your development environment, and you push the same data all the way out to production. In this case, I have a couple of, let me see. So we have linked or unlinked static data here.
Yep.
And this is going.
Okay. You paused for a minute.
So this is going to. Yeah. So so here you get a list of tables that you have on your database, and you can select the tables that you want to source control in terms of data. The schema is source controlled by default, but the data you would have to go in and select. So I have two tables, address type and contact type, that are source controlled in terms of data. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new record to the contact type table. Again, SQL Prompt makes it really easy, as you can see here. So I'm going to call this SVN Demo Audience. And I'm going to go ahead and commit these changes to source control. So I can simply right-click on my database, commit changes to source control. So as you notice, I didn't even have to save any scripts off. SQL Source Control would kind of handle that for us as part of the check-in process. So here's the two changes that we made, right? So we made a data change. Here at the bottom, it shows you what's different between your development database on the left side and what's already in source control on the right side. So it looks like all the records in our lookup table are identical, except that new one that we just added here at the top. And if you look at our store procedures, same thing. So you notice that we store data as insert scripts and schema as create script in source control. So we're comparing the definition of your objects going from development into source control, and that's what we store. So you can easily see what differences exist between your database and source control, and you can go ahead and commit those changes to source control. So if I go to my setup tab, this is the SVN server and the repository that my database is linked to. It's sitting on my local machine, but it's as simple as just providing the URL and linking the database to it. So I'm going to go ahead and write my check-in comment here. So we modified the USB get contacts struct and added a new contact type. And let's go ahead and commit that to source control. Okay, so now on the build side of things, I've set up a build process that gets triggered automatically every time I check in a change into my SVN repository. And today we're using TeamCity as our build system. So here you can see I have a project called AdventureWorks DB with SVN. And as you can see here, there is one pending build, which is going to get started any second now. So what we offer as part of DLM Automation is a set of plugins that you can utilize to easily get our database build steps into your build system. So if I go to the settings of my build and show you the build steps, there's 3 build steps here that we have. So the first one is the build, DLM Automation build, which basically does that validation. The way it does the validation is by creating a temporary database and populating that database with the objects that we have in source control. So that way it can check for invalid objects, syntax errors, and things like that. If the build succeeds, then that temporary database gets dropped. You can either do that build of the database on a specific instance of SQL Server or local DB, which is basically SQL Server Express that gets installed as part of our solution on your build server. Once that database gets built and validated, then it gets dropped, and all the content of the source control repository, so all those create scripts and insert scripts that you might have for data, get packaged up into a NuGet package. And this is basically the name of the NuGet package that we're going to use, AdventureWorks SVN. Once that NuGet package is generated, then you can go ahead and run a set of automated tests as the next step. So the test relies on 2 testing frameworks. One is called SQL Cup. The other one is TSQL-T. So if I go back to my database here and look at my store procedures, you can see I have a bunch of objects here, some with SQL Cup schema and some with TSQL-T schema. SQL Cup comes with a set of out-of-box tests that you can utilize to test, for example, coding standards to make sure that there is no problems with your column, your table names, data types, and things like that, or even some performance tests such as checking for fragmented indexes. The good thing about this is that it's all SQL, so if you need to customize any of these tests, you can just simply go ahead and modify those store procedures and check them into source control, which later can be picked up by the build system and validated. The other framework is TSQL-T, which is a unit testing framework. Unlike SQL Cup, these are not individual tests. However, you could use these objects to create your own unit tests to test the business logic of your database, such as the store procedures and functions and etc. In this case, I'm basically just relying on the SQL Cup tests. I haven't created any unit tests on the database. So that's what the test step does. It looks into your source control repository or the files that are checked out from source control, and if it finds any SQL Cup tests or TSQL-T unit tests, then it will go ahead and run those tests automatically. Once the tests are executed and they all pass, then the next step is to send the NuGet package that we generate to the NuGet feed used by Octopus Deploy which is the release management tool that we're going to use to deploy our changes to higher environments such as testing, staging, and production. You could also use the built-in NuGet repository of TeamCity, but in this case I'm using the Octopus Deploy one. So let's go back to our build and make sure that it succeeded. Yes, it looks like it succeeded. As you can see, all my tests passed, so we can look into the build log and see exactly what the steps look like in the build process. So here we basically created all those objects on that temporary database that I mentioned as part of our step 1, and once those objects are created, then it just validates the schema, which was successful. Then the next step is to go ahead and create a NuGet package. The version number is assigned based on the build number, so it's basically 1. Whatever the build number is, which makes it easier for you to associate a NuGet package back to a specific build in your build process. Okay, and finally the second step, which was the testing step. So it went ahead and ran all the SQL cop tests on our database, and finally, so you can see the test results. So we had 35 tests, no errors, they all passed, and they were all from the SQL cop testing suite. And finally, the publish to of the NuGet package to our Octopus Deploy NuGet feed. Okay, so now that we have a successful build, we can move on to basically deployment of those changes to our higher environments. So if I go into Octopus Deploy, first make sure that we have the correct NuGet package as the latest. So here's our NuGet package, and here's the version of the NuGet package that we just generated, which looks correct. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new release. So the project we're working with is AdventureWorks SVN. For those of you who are new to Octopus Deploy or a release management tool in general, it's basically serves as a tool for you to manage your deployments to higher environments on both the application code side and the database side using our DLM Automation templates that we offer for Octopus Deploy. It provides you with this nice dashboard where you can see all of your projects. You can see what the latest releases are to each of your environments and whether or not they were successful or failed. And you can just simply click on any of your releases and look at the details of it. So I want to go ahead and create a new release to deploy to my higher environment. So we're using the latest NuGet package, which was 1.9, as our source of deployment. So I'm going to go ahead and save this release, and I'm going to deploy this release to my testing environment to begin with. So I'll trigger the deployment to my testing environment, and in the meantime, I'll quickly show you what my deployment process looks like. So here we offer a set of templates for Octopus Deploy. Basically what DLM Automation is in the background is a set of PowerShell commandlets that you can either use in a PowerShell script, or you could use our templates, which is a wrapper around the PowerShell commandlets, which makes it easier for you to define your deployment steps or the build steps if you're not very familiar with PowerShell. So starting with our testing environment, as you can see, I'm using this step called deploy from package, which runs a comparison between the NuGet package and my testing database and generates a script that would be executed on the testing environment to match the state of the database that we have in the NuGet package. And then the next step, which only applies to my staging environment, so when we deploy to staging, it will run through this step, which is syncing staging to match production. So I'm doing a comparison between production and staging to make sure that they both match, and if production is drifted for any reason, then it will go ahead and get those changes down to staging to make sure that we are testing against the right version of the database before we go to production. The next step is, again, this only applies to staging and production, is to create a database release. And what this creates is a report of, first of all, what is being deployed, so what objects are being modified or added or dropped. And it also includes the update script, so what script is going to run on the target in order to apply those changes. Once you've reviewed that report as part of this manual intervention step, and once it's approved, then you can move on to the execution of the script on your target environment. So again, these are all done through the templates that we offer. So if I go into this template, you can see there's the fields that you just need to fill in, and it's basically as simple as that. So I'm going to go back to my dashboard. You can see the deployment to my testing environment succeeded. So we have the new version out to the testing environment. Now, before we look into deployments to any of the other environments, I'd like to quickly point out our DLM Dashboard tool, which is our drift detection tool. So basically what this tool does, and it's also a free tool, is monitoring the schema of your databases, and it can notify you once the state of your database in any of the environments changes. So for instance, we just deployed to testing. You can see it's now showing a drift on my testing environment. If I click on review, it will actually show me what changes, schema changes have been introduced to the testing database. So you can see there is a store procedure, one store procedure that has been modified. It was modified by this account, and this is what it was before on the left side, and this is what it is now on the right side. And you can also see how these changes were applied to the database. So in this case, I can manually go ahead and version this state of the database. I'm going to call it SVN 1.9. You can also get your build process to automatically send the state of the database that it builds from the NuGet package to DLM Dashboard. So when you deploy to your next environments, it will automatically see those as updates as opposed to drift. So now you can see my testing environment is at SVN version 1.9, but the other environments are still at the older version. So I'm going to go ahead and now trigger a deployment to my staging environment, where we'll actually get a chance to review that report of what's being deployed, as well as being able to approve or reject the deployment. So I'm going to go ahead and trigger the deployment to my staging environment. So it only goes through the steps that we've defined specifically for that environment, which in this case is staging. So now it's going through making sure that staging matches production in terms of schema, and once it's done that, it will create a report which will then be saved as an artifact for Octopus Deploy. This is another thing that I really like about Octopus Deploy, is having the ability to store artifacts for each release. So you can easily go back to your previous releases. So for instance, I can go back to release number 7 and look at the artifacts. So look at that HTML report to see what we deployed as part of release number 7. This feature, it doesn't really exist in some of the other release management tools that I've worked with. So, but it's a really nice feature, and gives you a nice audit trail of what's been deployed as part of each release and to each environment. Okay, now let's go back to our deployment to the staging environment. You can see now it stopped the deployment and it generated the artifacts for us. So now let's go ahead and review the report of what's being deployed. So I'm going to open this changes.html file. It's, come on, should start downloading.
The VM wants to go slow today.
Yeah. Let's try once more. There it is. Okay, so here's the report that our DLM Automation generates for your deployments. As you can see at the top, there are 3 tabs. We have the Changes tab, which shows you exactly what kind of changes are being promoted to the next environment. So here's, for example, the change that we made to the store procedure. We're following a Git style in this case just to show you how the definition of the object is changing. This is not the actual update script that is getting executed. And here is the other change that we made, which was that new record to our lookup table that we added. And then we have this, so there's 3 types of changes, right, you can make. So you can add new objects, you can drop objects, or you can modify existing objects. So in this case, we're only modifying existing stuff. The warnings tab would let you know if any of the changes that you've made could result into data loss. So if you drop columns or rebuild tables and things like that, you would see the warnings. And if there is any warnings, this is the first tab that it would take you to, as opposed to the changes tab. And finally, the deployment script that the tool generates. So this relies on our compare engine, which is basically the market-leading compare tool out there that is used by most SQL shops. And as you can see here, we have the alter procedure for our store procedure because it already exists in our staging environment. And here's the insert for that new record that we added to the contacts table, or the contact type table. Everything is encapsulated into a transaction, so if anything fails while executing the script, it will roll back to the beginning of the transaction. Once you review this report, then you can either go ahead and approve the deployment or reject the deployment. So in this case, everything looks good, so I'm just going to go ahead and write my comment and hit proceed. And it's now going to go ahead and execute that change onto our, execute that update script that we just reviewed to our staging environment. So once staging environment gets updated, then that should also update our DLM dashboard. So I'm just going to wait for this to complete, and then we'll switch to DLM dashboard here. Okay, so the deployment to staging was successful. And if I look at my DLM dashboard, you can see now instead of drift, it's showing it as an update. The reason for that is because we already approved and acknowledged the state that the same state that we deployed to the testing environment. So now it sees that we're deploying the same state, which is SVN 1.9, to the staging environment. And as a result of that, it sees that as an update. So if I go to review, you can see the same type of information. So you can see what type of objects are being modified, which account is modifying it, and what type of changes have been introduced. And basically the same process applies to my production environment. So I can go ahead and say promote to production, and it's going to go through the same steps as my staging, except that we don't have a step to make sure that production matches staging. So that's basically the process that you would be following at the high level using our DLM solution. The nice thing about this is, again, we plug into your existing infrastructure, so you can easily bring in the deployment steps or the build steps from your application code under the same project. So in this case, I only had steps for my database, but I could easily bring in, MS build steps to validate the state of my application code, and also to do deployments to the next environments, all under the same sort of infrastructure. So there's quite a few questions, and as Steve mentioned earlier, one of the questions was the new migrations feature that comes as part of our SQL Source Control tool. So Steve, would you mind if I just quickly go back and show that?
No, please, go ahead.
Okay, fantastic. So as part of SQL Source Control, there is this feature called migrations. And what migration is, it provides you with the ability to override the default behavior of the compare engine. So when you make a change to your database, SQL Compare basically runs a comparison to see what's different between your development database and what's already in source control. And based on that, it generates the update script. Now, sometimes there are some type of changes that cannot be handled properly by a compare engine. So there will need to be a manual intervention for you to replace the script that SQL Compare generates with the script that you would actually like to execute for those specific type of changes. So, for instance, just to show you as an example. I actually had a better example on another database that I have here. So I'll quickly switch to this database because if I were made to change some drastic changes to my tables, there's a lot of dependencies in AdventureWorks that I would need to fix, and that would take a long time. So I would show you a quick example here of a scenario where a migration script might be useful. So for instance, here we have this clients table, right? And in our clients table, we have these two columns, first name and last name. Let's say there's a new requirement to merge these two columns into a single column and call it full name. Obviously, when you make that schema change, you need to make sure that you're also handling the data portion of it. So transferring the data from these two columns into that new column, which is the full name column. So I'm going to go ahead and write a write the script that I would write to apply those changes. I already have a script saved up here just to save us time here. So we are merging the columns, so I'm going to run this merge column script here. So we're basically adding the full name column and updating it with some data from the existing columns, changing it to not null, and dropping the old columns. So I'm going to go ahead and execute this. Okay, so now I'd like to go ahead and check that change into source control. So go ahead and commit changes to source control. And here at the bottom, again, you can see what's different. Now, in our development database, we have full name column, whereas in our source control, we have first name and last name. You'd also notice at the top here that we have a warning saying that these changes could cause deployment errors or data loss. The reason for that is that SQL Compare would try to replace those old columns with full name, but it wouldn't know what to do with data because it can only do schema comparison. And that's the reason why we're seeing this warning here that our deployment might fail, or it could result into data loss. So it's giving me the option to add a migration script. The migration script would be basically the script that I just executed to apply those changes onto my clients table. So there's two types of migration scripts that you can write. One is a pure data migration, so no schema changes. If you just want to run one-off data scripts onto your next environments, you would use this start with a blank script option. Or if you want to do a migration for a specific schema change, then you would select those objects that are now modified and say generate script. This will generate the script that SQL Compare would try to execute, which we don't want. So basically what it's doing is copying all the data to a temporary table, making those column changes, and then copy the data back. But that's not going to help us here because the data that it tries to copy back will not be at the new format. So just want to get rid of that, and I'm going to replace that with the actual script that I executed on my dev environment. Okay, and I'm going to save this as a migration script. Now I'm ready to basically check that change into source control, knowing that that same script will be executed when applying this change to my higher environment. So you can see now it's saying there's a new migration script that covers the change to our client script, and what that change is, you can see here at the bottom. So I'm going to say replaced full name and last name, first name and last name. Okay, now we can go ahead and commit this to source control. So again, it just gives us a warning, but we already took care of that using migration, so I'm just going to acknowledge it and let it check the changes into source control. So in source control, we're going to basically save off those migration scripts, and we also create a metadata table on your databases to keep track of what migration scripts we've executed on your target environments and what migration scripts are pending to be executed. So so that's basically how we figure out which migration scripts we've already executed and which ones we need to execute as part of the next deployment. And these migration scripts are picked up by our build process, and they're also picked up by DLM Automation. So when you try to deploy, instead of generating the SQL compare script, it will use the migration script that you provided for that specific change. So in this case, the clients table. I'm not going to go through the whole process because I'd like to also have time to answer the other questions as well. But hopefully this could give you a good idea of when you would use a migration script as part of this solution. Okay, so Steve, are there any questions that we should try and tackle? Looks like you.
Yeah, I've done a few. So somebody's at, have you ever used or talked to anybody who uses AppFire to do builds?
No, I haven't.
So somebody's asking if we do that. It looks like it's an online system. It looks like mostly for Visual Studio builds rather than generic builds. So
yeah.
I'm just not sure if there's a way to install the DLM stuff in there, or SQL Server for that matter, if you're trying to do that.
Yeah. I mean, the general rule of thumb is that, first of all, there needs to be PowerShell support on that on the product that you would be using, so that way you can introduce PowerShell steps. The other requirement is for you to be able to install components on the agent or the build agent that runs under that product. So if it's an online solution, for example with TFS Online, you can install a local agent and install your additional stuff like DLM Automation on the local agent. So if it gives you the ability to have an on-premise agent, then you can install our DLM Automation on the on-premise agent and then execute the DLM steps through PowerShell if it does support PowerShell. So those are really the two main requirements that applies to pretty much all the build systems out there.
Okay, so somebody's asking about updated data too. So maybe real quick show updated data if you update something.
Sure. So let's see. So on the lookup tables, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see what data we have here. Contact type. Okay, so let's try to let's try to update one of these records here. That's what we want to see, right, Steve?
Yeah, let's update one of our lookup table items.
Okay, so contact type. Okay, set name to accounting manager. Let's call it account manager. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and commit this to source control.
Okay.
Commit changes to source control. So yeah, so here's the difference, right? So you can see in our source now we have account manager. In source control we have accounting manager. So it's going to go ahead and update that record. And when we try to do the deployment, instead of insert this time around, it will try to do the update on our target database.
Okay, there you go. So hopefully that answers and shows that. So somebody is asking about data warehousing builds.
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have any more information. I mean, we can use this for a data warehouse. I mean, database development is database development, right? The schema is just different, database warehouse. So I'm not
Right.
sure what else there. Somebody asked, how would you roll back the full name change back to 2 columns?
Yeah, really good question. So there is no way to roll that back systematically as part of the DLM process. You can only roll back changes that can be handled through the compare engine automatically. So, but in order to roll back that change that we made through migrations, you would have to basically write the script that would roll it back. Unfortunately, SQL Compare doesn't have the ability to look at a script that you provide as a migration script and figure out what the rollback script for that would be. So, so that would be a manual process.
Yeah, well, you could roll it forward, right? So you'd have to just rewrite
You can, yeah, exactly.
another migration script, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant to.
So somebody asked, is there a way to deploy code changes and database changes at the same time?
Yeah, so like for instance, if you're looking at Octopus Deploy, there is, where did Octopus Deploy go? Let's see. So when you're setting up your project, there is a certain set of steps that you can utilize to do different types of things, such as deployments. So when I go to add a step, there is some steps that are built into Octopus Deploy, and there are some set of steps that you can basically easily import from their online templates. So if you go to Octopus Deploy templates, for instance, you could utilize any of these templates to basically deploy, add your deployment steps for your application code, depending on what type of application it is that you're deploying. So you can see there is support for different types of frameworks, and if I scroll down, you can see there's a bunch of things. If you're deploying a web application, for example, there's all the functions to start and restart your IIS and everything else. And there's some stuff for MS build and running MS tests and those type of things as well. So you could utilize any of these steps and add them as part of the same process. So whether you want to do the database first and then just add steps to do the application under the same project. So it's just figuring out where in the process you want to do your deployments for the application code and the database, and just simply putting together that process under the same project.
Okay. So somebody's asking, can you Octopus for build and deploy? I don't think you can, right? Octopus isn't really designed for build.
No, yeah. So Octopus has no way to communicate with the source control system in order to check out files and do builds. So you would have to do the builds through a build system. The opposite works. You could utilize a build system to also do deployments, such as TeamCity, which is where you would use PowerShell to add those deployment steps. The only thing about release management tools that I like is it provides you with a nice dashboard that is specific for deployments, right? You can, specify your environments, you can specify your project releases, whereas if you're doing everything from a single tool, then you don't really have that luxury of being able to define what a release is, or what environments you have and all that.
Yeah. I mean, you could use TeamCity to do both. I don't recommend it because they're fundamentally different processes, and being able to see what releases have moved out and kind of track those differently is kind of nice, with
exactly,
tracking environments. So I would really say, use TFS release, use Octopus, use Bamboo, use something that's designed to do releases.
Exactly.
Yep. And then maybe the last one, somebody asked about SSIS and SSRS reports.
So yeah, I mean, we don't really have support for doing builds or deployments on SSIS and SSRS, so that would be done outside our workflow.
Yep. Yeah, and I think they're just it's just not that's a really hard problem to solve.
Yeah, yeah.
Microsoft keeps moving the way SSIS works a little bit, so nobody's really built anything to make that happen. So, all right, I think that's about it. We've got no more questions, so let me flip back over here, Arnie, to me and show my screen.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, hopefully you've enjoyed the webinar. You've learned a few things or got you thinking about how you might implement a smoother database development process, more of a DevOps process in your environment. If you need more help, we've got at /DLM and /training, we've got some information on the Redgate site. You can also email dlm@redgate.com if you'd like to get more information or you have other questions as well. Again, we're recording this webinar, so we will get this posted probably early next week, along with the Q&A will be posted as well, and you should all get an email that lists the URLs and things for there. Arnie, thank you very much for the demo, and hopefully everybody got a lot out of it. I think it looked really good.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
So everybody have a great day, and if you want to know more, I don't think we're going to do one in December, but we'll probably kick back off in January with a different version control system or different tools that we integrate with. So thanks a lot. Have a great day, and we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.